All right, this is Patrick Rogers, and today we have the privilege to have Jeff Greene on the show. And Jeff's the CEO of Greene's Reserve. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Great. Thanks. Great to be here.
Awesome. So Jeff has built dozens of companies over the last 40 years, from financial services to energy to cannabis. The latest product-based company was his first tangible product, where manufacturing and distribution were the challenges. Now, 2 years later, with a $12 million contract in hand, he's had many peaks and valleys, but making it to positive cash flow will be their next big milestone. So again, Jeff, great to have you on the show. And before we dive into Greene's Reserve and your journey there, what is one interesting fact that not many people know about you?
Patrick, I think, probably the thing that I don't necessarily share at a cocktail party is that I'm on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
It has been my superpower. I don't consider
Wow.
it a weakness. I consider it a superpower.
So tell me more. What is it about being on the spectrum makes it a superpower for you?
Well, being able to dive in and hyper focus and essentially retain information. I've gone from the financial services industry to the energy industry to the cannabis industry and become a national expert in all three, because my voracious ability to read and retain. And
Wow.
I think that a lot of that is based off of my autism. It's the ability. I could be in a room with 100 people talking to each other and read a book.
Really? That is fantastic.
It's
It's kind of funny though, because I'm the exact opposite. Like I have a general inability to focus. For example, you just talk about reading a book, right? If I
right,
have even the radio on that has words,
right.
or the TV, or if I'm in a room with people talking, forget it. I cannot read the book. And, growing up, there was all people who were, in study groups, they would all get together and study. I'm like, I don't know how the fuck you guys do this. I can't do it. Honestly,
Right.
can't do it. Yeah. So you'd be that guy, you'd be one of the guys in the study group and you'd be fine.
Well, I mean, study groups, again, were kind of somewhat
Well, yeah.
antisocial
Right.
as well. So
Uh,
it's a little bit, I kind of overcame that by playing basketball in high school and got popular. But I was the most antisocial person you knew as a junior high kid. Um,
wow.
so it's just, you learn. I mean, one of the other benefits of autism is that you don't really have empathy, but you learn it to mimic what other people expect. Um,
Interesting.
Good example is being hyper focused is great until your wife is talking to you and you don't hear her.
She will teach you real quick that empathy. So it's interesting though. Okay. So you don't innately have empathy, but what you're saying is through experiences of people and through certain situations, you've learned where a given situation would require you to have empathy to socially fit in and have social awareness.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of respects, my maturity through the different businesses that I ran, first and foremost, um, businesses need a narcissist to run them because that you believe in yourself so much that it doesn't matter what everybody else says. And so, in some
That's
respects,
the first time I've heard that, but I can definitely see where you're coming from on that standpoint.
so in some respects, it's a positive, thing in the
Yeah.
business world. But you start dating women and being a narcissist is the worst thing you can be. So it's the reality of trying to fit into society, but also, and this is a joke that I've had with my partner in the business. For 8 hours a day, I'm a superhero. For 8 hours at night, I'm a villain, and then I sleep 8 hours.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So that's really the rub of at least my experience with the spectrum and the other addictive personalities that I've got going through all of the life choices that I've made. Again, peaks and valleys with businesses, peaks and valleys across the board.
Yeah. No, very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's a very vulnerable stance, and so I appreciate that. So tell us about Greene's Reserve. Tell us about your company.
Yeah, I mean, I've got just essentially what we're doing is we're making a hemp product to replace tobacco. And this
Love
is
it.
an example of it. It's, you know, alternative to smokeless tobacco. And what I'm finding, ironically, is a lot of people came out with hemp cigarettes. And hemp cigarettes were an idea that we passed on because I went out and did some market research and found that out of 100 tobacco smokers, 0 out of 100 wanted to switch. But out of
Really?
100 smokeless tobacco users, 86 were willing to switch.
Really? Now, what do you, how deep did you dig into that market research? Did you dig into why? What's the behind the?
We didn't go much further than, I mean, that was enough for
Okay.
me to say, we're not going to do
Sure.
cigarettes
Sure.
stuff. But, I think the reality of it is that with dip, with both, technically, you have an oral fixation. You putting something in your mouth is an oral fixation, and that is an addiction in itself. The nicotine is secondary to your oral fixation. And so just like in the energy business, where we built natural gas stations on gasoline station properties, humans can only change so much without it being very, very expensive. If you look at electric cars, we've had electric cars since the 70s.
Right,
it's been took 50 years for this rapid adoption.
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
So, I think that.
Well, that's the gas companies, though. I mean, that's,
well, yeah. I mean, certainly
legislation.
there's subversion across the board, but the tobacco companies are no better.
Sure, absolutely.
But I mean, they're my customers, so I got to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah, right. That's true. Okay, so hemp pouches. Is there nicotine in hemp? No. So there's no nicotine.
Cannabinoids, and your body has an endocannabinoid system, which is basically receptors in your brain, the same receptors that actually are opioid receptors. So the reason that opioids are so addictive is that there are receptors in your brain that crave it. And those cannabinoid, the endocannabinoid system has been dormant in most humans in America for 70 years when they made hemp and hemp products and marijuana illegal.
Right.
And so why you saw, outside of getting high, what most hippies will tell you in the 60s was it was a very mellow effect. And that was their endocannabinoid system creates a homeostasis in the body. That's what scientists have discovered, is that the plant is actually used in tandem with mammals to create natural homeostasis.
So, okay. So the pouches, then they have, well, cannabinoid or
cannabinoids.
Cannabinoids. Okay. Now, is that same thing as CBD? I'm pretty
new to CBD
all this.
CBD is a cannabinoid. So there's CBD, CBA, CBG, CBN, THC, which is the psychotropic, THC, and then THC delta 8, delta 10, delta 12. So there are 144 different molecules in the hemp plant, at least discovered. 144 discovered molecules in the hemp plant. And so what we do is we take the flower of the hemp plant, we grind it, mill it or grind it up, and either put it into a pouch for millennials or leave it as loose cut for older folks. Pouches didn't come along in smokeless tobacco until the 90s.
Yeah, 20 years ago or whatever that is. Yeah. So, okay. So I've been, my whole life, I've worked for a company where you couldn't do drugs, all that kind of stuff. And so, and I never did. I think the first time I smoked pot, I was like was going through my divorce. I was like 37 or something,
Yeah.
13 years ago. And but now though, like I'm really realizing that alcohol is just taking a toll. I see so many friends having issues, liver, blah, blah, blah. So experimenting, transitioning to other things. One of the things I'm kind of getting into is like, gummies that have like a 1 THC to 1 CBD, type thing. So if I do a pouch, is it going to have like some of that? And the CBD, I think, is like the body high, right? That maybe that's that homeostasis. I don't know, but is the pouch going to have some of those effects that people will get from like edibles and such?
Well, what we're experiencing is that because we basically add flavor and glycerin and some other products into our pouch, it's really taking that THC level down to almost non-detectable.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you're not going to get high from using our product,
Right.
but you are going to be a good example that I got was the first guy that ever invested in our company was an attorney. And he said, for the last 20 years, my shoulders have been rock hard. That's how he's stressed.
Yeah. Right.
And he said 20 minutes after he took this first dip, his shoulders relaxed.
Wow.
And so that is a good example. I've got testimonial after testimonial on my website. It's just amazing. That's what we keep doing it for. And we just launched Greene's Reserve Research Center on January 3rd. We're going to prove scientifically that we can cure lip, throat, and tongue cancer with our product. So
get out of town.
That's what's in the works.
Holy cow, man. That is fantastic. I know you mentioned your website. We're going to get to it again later, but what is your website, just so people can hear it now in case they want to look up and watch as we're listening?
Sure. It's Greene's, like my name, GREENES, Reserve, RESERVE.com.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, and I'll say, like, personally, I've noticed that, like, I actually don't enjoy THC, but I really enjoy CBD, and a lot of times when if my body is hurting, I'll take some of those, and I'll wake up the next morning, I'm like, holy cow, I feel really good.
Yeah, and what you're experiencing with that THC to CBD balance is what the plant creates in nature. A naturally occurring cannabis plant will create a homeostasis in its own self with an equal amount of THC and CBD. Now they are genetically modifying it to grow for the purpose, either higher THC or higher CBD, depending on why you grow it. The marijuana industry wants higher THC.
So help me understand, and I hope it's okay that we're kind of digging into this instead, the leadership stuff. I think this is just so interesting, man. We'll get to the leadership stuff, because you've obviously you've done some fantastic things. I can't wait to dig into that. But like, when you did your market research and you're talking to people, right? I mean, they're used to putting a pouch in their mouth and having nicotine, right? So they're used to them waking up, and they're used to that being the result of it, right? Whereas 86% of the people, they were okay with switching, but do they understand that they're not going to get the same effect out of it?
So what we heard from longtime users of smokeless tobacco was that jolt no longer occurs.
Really? Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense then.
Yeah, so they are essentially almost robotically using it. Yeah. And so it's not the first time user, or if you've never used smokeless tobacco before, that carcinogens, it's not the nicotine, it's the carcinogens and all of the crap that they put in there gives you that jolt.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha.
And so what happens is, as you essentially numb your lip with those carcinogens, you no longer get that jolt. And I don't know how long. I'm not a dipper. My partner is. My partner dipped skull wintergreen for 30 years, and so it's just mind-boggling. He would have a 20-ounce bottle with a napkin in it, or a can or something all the time. And to me, it's just disgusting. But, the nice thing about our product is you can swallow.
Oh, okay. And not
Um,
end up puking and
right.
have it
And
taste like
actually
crap.
it will actually heal your gut if you have any type of into gastro issues. So
Man,
I've got people calling me saying, "Hey, I swallowed it and my colon and my stomach have never felt better."
man, that's just amazing. Yeah, CBD is definitely a wonder.
Oh,
I almost don't even
it's,
say drug. It's
I mean, when I found out about CBD back in 2015,
yeah,
and I had looked at the medical marijuana licenses in Florida. They were $40 million. It was a rich man's game. And while I had a few million
mm,
dollars, I didn't have 40.
yeah, right,
So
right,
I looked at it and said, can't do it. Cool opportunity, missed it. I was in CNG at the time, compressed natural gas, and sold
right,
my business in 2018, and was kind of just looking for something to do,
right.
and started mentoring some kids down at the Sigma Chi FIU campus down in Miami.
Okay,
And three of those kids were the marketing company for Green Roads, which is one of the early CBD companies.
okay.
And that's where I really got the on the ground knowledge. Laura and Arby, the founders of Green Roads, basically came out with a pseudo illegal product. Laura tells me that I basically legalized the product in the state of Florida. And Laura said the first good night of sleep she got was when I passed a bill that made hemp products legal in Florida.
That's right. So you do a lot of lobbying.
Yeah, that's how I got into the space. I looked at what was going on at Green Roads and tried to be a
Mm,
distributor for them for 6 months or so and realized that wasn't the angle to go. And then RB asked if I could lobby, and coming from the natural gas space, we got an excise tax credit and grants through the governor's energy office, which doesn't exist anymore. That was back with Charlie Crist, but nonetheless knew the system, knew Tallahassee, and so told him I could do it. And unlike most lobbyists, I got 3 bills passed in 3 sessions, and essentially
wow.
worked myself out of a job in 3 years.
Right,
And
right.
from there, kind of worked into the industry through launching a trade association, and then ultimately into Greens Reserve during the pandemic.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, because you launched, geez, right at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Pretty much.
Well, it's October of 2020. So we
Okay.
had, we kind of had done all of our market research during the pandemic. That was a good time to, nobody was doing anything. The trade
Yeah.
associations clients were going away. We were, stressed that we weren't going to be able to meet payroll,
Right.
and we got a few grants and PPP loans, et cetera, but that's not sustainable. To me, relying on the government to pay you is not a good
Not a good strategy.
strategy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so started looking at other options at that point, and went down the rabbit hole of hemp flower, which
Hmm.
was to me unsustainable because of the inconsistencies in THC level. Regardless of how good a farmer you are, you cannot tell me that every plant has the same amount of THC in it. We're not genetically pure enough yet to be able to say that. And
Yeah.
so I was worried that I would be selling something that I thought was legal to a
Mm,
retailer, to find out that it wasn't legal, and then they would get arrested or charged, or have
yeah.
some kind of negative thing. And then second thing was to do pre-rolls or cigarettes, and found out that not only were they not in demand from customers, at least the ones that I talked to, there was very little barrier to entry. Now I'll tell you today, my largest customer are the guys that leaned into the hemp cigarettes, and there is somewhat of a market for them. They'll tell you. I mean, the tobacco company that I private label for, as well as a hemp company that I'm talking to, both say that their hemp cigarettes are selling, and that's great. I'm not just my research doesn't mean it's so.
Wow.
And so, but when I tell them what a great tangent product to
Yeah.
your sales force, why would you sell cigarettes without having smokeless tobacco as an alternative product to retailer?
Sure.
And they all so far have agreed. And the first one wrote us a $12 million contract. So
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. Have more of those conversations.
yeah.
So okay, yeah, very cool. So I mean, you're making a product that's literally, last time we talked, I mean, it saves lives from the standpoint of people have an option, an alternative from nicotine pouches, which is obviously cancerous, and as well as a number of the other things that they put in there. But now, on top of that, it actually can cure cancer.
We believe so. We're
We
going to
believe so.
obviously have to
Right.
scientifically prove it, and that takes millions of dollars in time. But we
Yeah.
believe so.
I mean, and if that's the case, then that's just amazing. So,
Right.
awesome, man. Well, so hey, thanks for taking that extra time and really diving into the product. I think that this is something that you're really groundbreaking. You're really going to disrupt the industry. So I feel like it was really good use of our time to dive into that. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and now talk a little bit about, this. It's been, geez, 2.5 years you've been building this company. And you're already at the point from our talking, like the company's pretty much for the most part runs itself. Or, I mean, we could dive into a little bit more, but talk about what you built here that's
Yeah.
allowed you to create where you're at.
Yeah. I mean, and I think people is the thing that I've been most blessed with, being able to recruit. I've got a team at our manufacturing facility that we went through periods of months where we weren't able to pay them, months
wow.
where we were having to move from one building to the next because of permitting or different things. But they've gone through the gambit with us, and I've got a loyal group of people up in Ocala that
Yeah.
I would put up against any Fortune 500 company.
Wow.
My C-suite is a group of people that I trust will do their job. And that is, I don't call them every day and say, what did you do? I call them when I need something. I say I need it done and expect it to get done. And it does 99% of the time.
Sure. Yeah.
And so,
which is very nice for a business owner to have. Yeah.
Right. And that's really, I think, the trick of figuring this out. I watch Shark Tank and watch these guys that say, we did $1 million in sales and I'm all by myself and I don't know how to scale. Well, I know how to scale, but I don't want to go out and hit the pavement and sell $1 million by myself. I would rather have my team build the company and then we grow it and sell it together. Part of what I did was also that group of loyal employees get 10% of the company. That was what I carved out when I started, was
the total aggregate.
Anybody that's with me from the beginning will get a percentage of 10% when we sell.
I love that.
Which there are some ramifications of that. Some of the early people were kind of holding it over some of the later people. So we had to make sure that we had the rules in place that everybody understood. But generally, I think it's a good thing. If you can make people feel like that they are part of the solution, and that their ideas are heard.
Absolutely. So real quick, to come back to the equity portion of it, how did you structure that such? Is it something where they have to be still with the company when it gets sold to have that equity ownership?
Right. Yeah. So what we did is I put it into a trust, and if none of the people are still there in 4 years or 5 years or whenever we sell, then I retain it. But if any of them are left, then they will split 10%.
What about new C-suite? What about new C-suite members that bring on? Let's say you have a gap. Your COO leaves, and maybe he had 3% of the company. He's like, "No, I'm out of here." A new COO comes in. Are you not going to give that person the equity?
No, well, I mean, what we've got right now is that's different. That is, if somebody has come in with equity, then we buy that equity back from them at either a market price or an agreed upon price. So right. What I don't want is somebody leaving the company and retaining it. And we've got actually that situation happening right now. And I'm trying to raise money to clean the balance sheet up and clean the corporate structure up. essentially what we're doing right now is raising $1.5 million for 20% of the company, and basically buying those people out that have left and still
Gotcha.
have some ownership.
Yeah. Very cool. So you were kind of going into kind of your management philosophy a little bit when I brought you back
Yeah.
to that. So yeah, keep
Yeah.
going.
So, I'm not a micromanager. I don't like to have meetings unless the meetings have meaning. And so, for the first 6 months or so when we were doing R&D, we met every Monday because every Monday we had something to do.
Yeah.
But in the last year, where the only real update I needed to give people was, whether or not we could pay them and whether or not they needed to ship product. We didn't have a lot of overall meetings. I've got a director of sales that is going out and getting me deals. I've got a chief technology officer that's working with our social media company to make sure that all of our ad spend and everything else is good. Twitter being able to advertise cannabis businesses just happened today. And so
yeah, I heard about that. Congrats.
yeah, there's so things are changing, and we knew they would. Being a disruptor, you use the word disruptor, and being a disruptor is what I've done in all of my industries. Being a disruptor is what I enjoy.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges for you as you go down this journey?
Well, getting to positive cash flow will solve 90% of them.
Okay.
Going out and continually trying to raise money, especially in what we can call a pseudo recession, is a challenge. Going out right now and saying, I want somebody to invest their hard-earned money into a company that is not profitable yet is, a challenge. We've got to find the right person, and we've gone through dozens of them at this point and trying to get to the right one. And we'll get there. The nice thing about it is that I still have enough narcissism to believe that we have the right product in the right place, and we just got to find the right person.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and speaking of investors in raising money, it sounds like you actually had a point in your journey where you had some investors try to steal your company or companies. I don't know if it was this one. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so this one, as well as two others in my lifetime, essentially you go out with an idea, and generally speaking, unless you're generationally wealthy, you've got to put your trust in somebody to go from my idea works and I think I can make money with it to I've got a contract and I've got to lease a building, buy machinery, do something. Generally speaking, you're going to have to go out and find a partner or an investor.
Right.
And in my experience, those early investors are the ones that you've got to be most confident in and button up legally the best, because those are the guys that will screw you if you let them. And so what generally happens is you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a lot of money for an attorney. It may be an attorney that's investing in you. And the reality of it is that they've got more savvy than you do.
This could be like other people's money, a little Danny DeVito action, right?
And so, you just got to take the time to understand the contract, understand the agreement. And this particular time, I was able to, through shareholder and board meetings, squash a shareholder coup. But in situations in previous times, I wasn't able to because of personal shame or just personal ignorance.
Yeah, and I think this happens a lot more than people realize. In fact, my last podcast guest told a story about the same thing, where he had investors come in and he had thought that they had their best interest in mind, but they didn't. They just, they were. It's not their baby.
Right.
It's all about the financials, and they weren't willing to wait, so they shut it all down. Right. So, And I think it's tough, right? Because as you've got this great idea, and we don't know, we've never raised money before. This is all new to us, and someone's willing to give us their money, and we got to sign their contract. Okay, sure. I'm not going to, read the red tape. It's fine. I'm getting the money. I'm good, right?
Right.
And so what
Yeah,
you're
and
saying
generally,
is stop.
generally you're desperate at that time, and you have
You
to
are.
have their money. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they have the upper leg, and those are the sharks. Those are the guys that will, eat you alive if you let them.
Yeah. Gotcha. Very cool. So let me ask you, if you were going to hire a CEO to take the reins for your company, Jeff, what's the one book that you would require he or she read before they take over for you?
The book that I really most enjoy about a CEO is Steve Jobs' biography. I think Steve was a genius, and Apple is still using the ideas that Steve created to create product.
Absolutely.
And I think that even though he was a bit of an asshole, he was brilliant 8 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think was like the top one or two things that you took from his biography that you've been able to emulate and implement in your leadership style?
Well, I mean, if you listened, Steve didn't have a lot of meetings, and they had to have purpose. I believe that is directly taken from him. And then, Steve narcissistically believed in his ideas. And nobody, absolutely nobody could tell him otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, he had plenty of failures, and I've had plenty of failures as well. But you go into a failure thinking it's going to be the next great thing. And next was his next great thing that was a failure, but he did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I look at the guy that came in and ran Coke in the 90s and came out with New Coke. And everybody thinks New Coke was a failure.
Mm-hmm.
But New Coke, and then making the business decision to go back to Coke Classic, made Coke the largest and kept it as the largest. Pepsi was gaining on Coke.
Right.
And when that happened, Coke took such a lead that Pepsi could never take them over. It was because they took a risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it.
And
awesome.
And so that's the kind of the mindset that Steve, I was fortunate enough to meet Steve, and early.
Wow.
When he was just a geek, not a millionaire or billionaire, whatever he ended up being. And so it was really, you didn't really, most people that meet Steve don't like Steve.
Okay.
He wasn't a great father. He wasn't a great human to others, but he was steadfast in his beliefs.
Right. Nobody was going to shake him off his drive and direction. Yeah.
Right.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, hey, Jeff, amazing having you on the show. I want to summarize a couple of my key takeaways. One was, man, I just really enjoyed our first 20 minutes of the conversation, just really digging into what you're doing and how disruptive this really is. I mean, this is really disruptive. Not only are you providing an alternative with people that have that oral fixation for having a pouch in their mouth, and yeah, they're not going to have the nicotine hit, but like you said, they're pretty much immune to it now, and so now they can experience actually enjoy the healing benefits of CBD. But now on top of that as well, you guys are going down a path to hopefully prove, and my fingers are crossed for you there, man, because that's amazing. If you can actually cure mouth, throat, and nose, tongue cancer. Yeah, that's just, man, that's just fantastic. And I'm sure that gives you and your team like such a drive for what you're doing.
Yeah. No, this is my swan song. This is the last one, I suspect. And I want it to be the biggest.
There you go, man. Yeah, pulling out all the stops on the swan song. So a couple other key takeaways is your C-suite. Number one is you give them equity in the company. And I will reiterate and just, I love that the most successful CEOs, most successful business owners, excuse me, especially if they have multiple locations, the people running their company, the C-suites, they have equity, they have stake in the game. So I think that's fantastic. And
And
you
not
gotta,
just my C-suite, but also my factory workers.
oh, okay. They have a certain equity as well.
As long as they stay with us from start to finish, they will be part
The
of
total's 10%.
the
Okay,
total.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And so the C-suite, another takeaway is just really trusting that they'll do your job. Getting, it sounds like, I mean, getting the right people there, getting people who are on board with your vision. From an investor standpoint, you know, be careful early on, especially when you're desperate. Take the time to have your attorney read the agreement. And the other one was Steve Jobs. I think that's amazing. Is you know, don't have a lot of meetings. They have to have a real purpose, and narcissistically believe in your ideas. So Jeff, if there's one takeaway that you'd want our listeners, and again, that's up and coming managers, up and coming CEOs, aspiring CEOs, if there's one takeaway that you want our listeners to get a hold of and absorb, what would that be?
Treat people like you want to be treated. I think that at the end of the day, you get so many people that think that they go out and, you know, I've had companies say that the top salesperson is making more than the CEO, and that can't be. If that salesperson is making more money, he's making more money for you.
For a reason. Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to do it. He's doing
Right,
it, or
right.
she.
And so that's been the biggest, you know, head pounding moment that I've met any CEO is you don't have to be the number one earner to be CEO.
Yeah, not at all.
If you've got a sales guy that is just killing it for you, don't change the game so that he makes less.
Yeah.
And don't fire him because your ego is so hurt that he's making more money than you. Just treat people the way you want to be treated. And once you obviously you have to pivot. Pivoting is entrepreneur 101. If you don't know how to pivot, you're not going to succeed. But don't pivot away from what works.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fantastic advice, man. So Jeff, if any of our listeners wanted to reach out and get a hold of you, I'd love for you to give your website again. But if they had any questions, wanted to reach out about anything from the show today, leadership advice or anything like that, what's the best way they get a hold of you?
Yeah, obviously I'm on LinkedIn. That's how we connected. And so you can reach out, Jeff Greene, on LinkedIn. I think I'm one of only 600 Jeff Greenes on LinkedIn. So that's pretty easy to find.
So we'll have your link in the on our website. We'll have the link to Jeff's LinkedIn profile as well.
Yeah, I think there's 6 Jeff Greenes in South Florida. So it's pretty common, believe it or not.
All right.
And then additionally, our website again is greensreserve.com, which is my last name with an S, reserve.com. And then my email address is my first name, Jeff, dot my last name, Greene, at greensreserve.com.
Oh, very cool. And again, thanks for being on the show, man. I love what you're doing. Your swan song, I know you're going to be successful. You're committed to it, and it's serving such a huge purpose for the human race, man. So I'm excited to follow you, and we'll have you back on the show, you know, 6 months, a year from now when we reconnect, and that'd be awesome.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
Very good. So for the listeners out there, please hit like and subscribe and help us spread the word about what we're doing here and how we're trying to really help out the next generation of our leaders become amazing. With that, Jeff, again, thanks for being on the show, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, sir.